So we'll talk about too that I want to hear about whether people really camped out in the parking lot.
Yeah.
And also the story about the Mitsmobile and clubs.
Okay.
Yeah. So far, and then
We'll start with
the sentence about what the military really did, and not what it did, but its contribution.
yeah.
Are we rolling?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we'll talk about a couple of these firsts. Just go on about some of the first. Yeah.
Is there a new noise that came
Speedy?
Speeding.
Scott, you're okay out there?
Did he
Scott,
answer you?
Come in, Scott. Okay.
It sounds louder than it did before, but I don't know why.
Okay, we set?
Yep.
Okay, you ready, Scott? Better?
We're ready. That is better.
Okay. It seemed louder. Okay, we were talking about some of the firsts. Can you talk about the World Altar Conference? Did you have any say in what was being presented, or can you describe it a bit?
The conference was Dave Bonnell's project. And he's the one that set up the hotel and pretty much did all the advertising and all that. And I really had very little to do with that. That was Dave Bonnell's thing.
Did you attend it?
Oh yeah, I attended it. I think I called it Bonnell's Folly until it did real well, and then I said I'm glad I thought of that. But
What about the Mitsmobile? Can you talk about the
I mean,
Mitsmobile?
who in the hell is going to drive all the way to Albuquerque to go to a computer conference? I mean, that just doesn't make any sense. And we had thousands of people showed up. I mean, thousands of people. It was crazy. Anyway,
So you were surprised.
yeah, very surprised.
Can you talk about the Mitsmobile? Whose brainchild was that?
That was mine.
Can you say that in a complete sentence?
The idea of having a mobile home rigged up to where you could sell computers by driving around the country was mine. That's not exactly what you want me to say, though, is it? The Mitsmobile, which actually had some computers in it that we could demonstrate all over the country, was mine. And we ultimately ended up not really using the computer, the motorhome to demonstrate computers. We always was set up in a motel, and we just used it as a way to transport them. And the guy we had on the road rode in it, and that was really what it ended up being. But it was still called a Mitsmobile, and
Is it a marketing device?
as a pure marketing device. And one of the things, the reason for doing that, as opposed to some other kind of marketing device, most people saw that and saw, here's a computer for $400. It's got to be a gimmick, right? You know that's got to be a gimmick. When the computers at that time were selling for tens of thousands of dollars, albeit a lot better computers, but whenever we could let somebody actually see one of them and see the quality and watch it work and all that, they sold themselves. And that's what the idea was, to get the word out. We were trying to get the word out about that these things are real. They're really what we say they are, and they do what we say they'll do. And that's what the Mitsmobile did for us. And everywhere it went, there was always a bunch of nuts, like me, same sort of enthusiast that I was. This group I mentioned earlier that lusted after computers were always there at the meetings, and somebody in the crowd would always say, hey, why don't we form a club with all this crowd? And everybody would say, okay. And so they'd end up forming a club. And so I think almost every place we ever went with a Mitsmobile, there was a club formed that continued on as long as I was involved with MITS. We'd still get letters from them. I think we even sent them spent the club special stuff to let them know what was going on and things like that.
What about computer notes?
That was Dave Bonnell's. That was probably his name for the magazine. The idea of the magazine was probably several of us on that. It was a newspaper that we sent out once a month just to kind of be a way to maintain contact with customers, and idea that a fairly cheap way to advertise was what the idea, and also to talk about fixes or problems or different things you could do with your computer that would help make it more desirable.
I've scanned through a lot of them, and you had computer clubs listed, you had your dealerships listed, and software programming. It was very personable too, because you had a lot of people taking photos of themselves and
Yeah.
what they were doing. Yeah, it's a good idea.
That's pretty much a hobby part of the market there.
Can you describe what the parking lot was like? Were people camping out in the parking lot the way we've read to get their computers?
You mean people at MIT's trying to get their computer? I don't remember camping in the parking lot per se. I guess we probably had that. I guess we had people that would come down and, they'd get a delivery date when we said we were going to deliver it, and they'd be there waiting for it. And if it wasn't going to be delivered that day, they'd just hang around until we got around to getting it to them. I got some jet time, which was at the time when I was flying. It was good to get. We had a customer who owned a crystal manufacturing company that flew in with his jet, personal jet, and we didn't have his machine ready. It was going to be several hours before it was ready. So he said, "Well, you want to fly my jet?" So we went out there at Sunport and flew his jet around for a while, and came back and got his computer.
This has been fun.
Yeah, but you got to be pretty serious to fly a jet. At $1,000 an hour, whatever it costs you to go down and get your own to pick up a computer.
It's quite enthusiasts. So you had all these orders, and could you fill them all?
No. We had a huge backlog when I left MITS. It had gone down significantly, but we still had a big backlog. As a matter of fact, most of the competition, like MSI, for instance, would have never existed if we'd been able to fill the orders. That's what allowed MSI to exist. As a matter of fact, the people at MSI even said that. That's the reason they got going. They realized we couldn't. The guy that financed MSI had come to us. He was a car dealer or sold parts or something, but he came to us. He wanted to get a special contract to buy Altairs at a quantity where he could set up all his dealerships with computers. And we just couldn't sell them to him in the kind of quantity he wanted. We couldn't even give him a good date. And that's what made him go back and get together some guys and do MSI. And that's sort of the story. It may not be dead accurate, but that's sort of the story.
What do you feel the contribution of the Altair was in history?
We probably got computers in the hands of individuals a little quicker than it would have happened without the Altair. I think it would have happened anyway. I don't delude myself into believing that somebody else wouldn't have figured this out eventually. But it took a lot longer than I thought as far as anything original. It was, well, I don't know of anybody that did it without the Altair. The Altair precipitated all the competition. It would have been a number of years before we were a number of years ahead of anybody else as far as doing that.
So if you were going to tell a 5th or 6th grader who's standing by that machine in the gallery, if you were to say, this machine was important because, how might you summarize that for a young person?
It created a whole new industry and put computers in the hands of individuals. Sort of a chicken in every pot kind of thing. But that was the main thing. One of the things I used to ask myself, just thinking about it, and sometimes I'm going to sit down and write down all these silly philosophical things I've got, but the old thing about what if you give a million monkeys a million typewriters, what I'm going to write King Lear. And I actually think about the same thing with computers. If you gave a million people a million computers, what's going to come out of that we can't? It's not going to be something you can anticipate. And so far, we really haven't seen that. The only thing that I've seen that I would consider a major, gigantic application. What do you think it is? Well, I don't before I say. Any of you?
That's kind of what we're asking the public too at the end, what do you think it's gonna be?
Well, what do you think is the major, is it, if you take, assume the computer was a tool, what's been the major thing that's come out of use of this tool?
Communicating with other
Communication,
people.
that's what I
Access
would
to
say.
information.
Yeah, I'm thinking internet's what
Capturing
same
the
thing,
world-
internet.
World brain.
Yeah, internet's the thing that, which is just another way to say communication, but, when you think, you've got at your house, you've got access to a much better library than you had if you were at the world's greatest university 35 years ago. I mean, you've got it all. You go in your bedroom, turn on your computer, and you can do anything you want to do. And that was the internet that did that. And that was an application that I didn't think of. Even though I'd been in the Air Force and I knew about the ARPA network and all that kind of stuff, it just never really hit me. And I don't think it actually ever really specifically hit anybody. It was an evolutionary thing, I mean, some people got on with the ARPA network using personal computers, and they got a little bit fancier and a little bit fancier. And over a period of about 20 years, it actually formed the internet. And the internet, in terms of what we've seen today, didn't really get going until probably, 10 years ago, 15 years ago? That's when it really, people realized you could do business with this thing,
Can you repeat that about for the fifth grader? You said it really succinctly. You said it started a whole new business and it put computers in the hands of people, but you didn't say the Altair at the beginning, so we just want to get a good sound bite. So the importance of the Altair is.
You need to get this the first time. I'm serious. I don't even remember what I said.
I say it a different way now.
right.
We'll see if you agree with yourself.
The main contribution to the Altair was, one, it created an industry. Two, it gave the average individual a computer, gave a computer capability, and created a whole new world in some respects as a result of that.
Let's talk about Albuquerque a little bit. And you were in the Air Force in Albuquerque, and you got out. And is that why you stayed in Albuquerque? Was because of the Air Force and your
No.
friends were there?
I had the company going before I got out of the Air Force. It was still going, so we ended up and running. And so there's no reason to leave. I loved Albuquerque.
What did you love about it?
Everything about it. It's a neat area. The last time I was there, which has been 8 or 9 years ago, a lot of the appeal had gone down. It was starting to be wall-to-wall people. When I first went there were huge areas. There weren't any, vacant lots and stuff, and there wasn't very much of that there when I was there 10 years ago. And I think the population was up around 1 million people, if I'm not mistaken, 10 years ago. Does that sound right?
The metropolitan area is now 700,000, but that's Rio Rancho, Belen, Las Vegas. Albuquerque itself is about 500,000.
Well, the metropolitan area was about 300 when I left, 300,000. So it's looked like it had gotten a lot bigger. But it was a nice area. It was so many neat things you could do there. I'm a motorcycle rider. I used to do a lot of cross-country motorcycle riding, and we'd go up in the mountains and go out and explore all that stuff. And I love to fly. And there's some neat areas to fly to in Albuquerque.
Why did you choose the locations for your MITS buildings for the business?
Just became available. Wasn't
I'm sorry.
any magic reason.
Anything about Albuquerque that you feel supported your ability to create these innovations in electronics? Anything special about the town or about the atmosphere at the time that?
Oh yeah, the interesting thing about Albuquerque from an electronic standpoint, Albuquerque from an electronic standpoint, to start off with, is a tiny town. It's if you talk about the electronic centers in the world, you're talking about San Francisco and Dallas and places like that. And here's Albuquerque that have 300,000 people. But Albuquerque is 500 miles from anything else. And there's a good bit of military and a good bit of scientific and all around there. So the net effect is all of these semiconductor companies, all the electronic manufacturing companies had reps in Albuquerque. So anything I wanted to get information on, there was a good chance there was a rep right in Albuquerque. So even though its size would make you think that there wouldn't be any of that kind of industry there, it was there, and it was readily available. And it was small enough that I got to know all the reps good, and you could get a lot of, you could get things that you might not be able to get in a big city where they were looking for the big contracts and the big hits.
You mentioned earlier, which I really liked, you were talking about how you allowed people to do other things in your company. You had a lot of younger kids working for you.
Yeah.
What was your relationship with these kids?
I was considered pretty tough then, pretty tough to deal with. And that was where you kind of needed to keep things in control. But I don't think anybody that ever had an idea wasn't allowed to follow. If it was a decent idea, well thrown out, wasn't allowed to follow that idea up, and wasn't encouraged to follow it up. And generally, if you do that to people, I think you get them on your side. In the Air Force, I took a course on management, and I'm not much of a manager or that kind of stuff. But they said you can always judge a manager by the quality of the people that he has working for him. And I always thought, boy, if that's true, I got to be the world's greatest manager, because I really, and I don't mean that sounds egotistical. I don't mean that egotistical, but I really had some good people working for me. I mean, some really outstanding people working for me, and that was, a lot of the key to MITS. We had some really bright guys. I say bright guys, bright females too. We had several women. One that I haven't mentioned was a vice president. I made vice president because we couldn't hire a male for anywhere near what we could hire her for. That sounds kind of chauvinistic, doesn't it? But that was before all that was going on. Before the things had really changed. And
Who was that, and what did she do?
well, I wish you hadn't asked that now. She may have been Dave Bonnell's boss. I'm not sure. I think she may have been director of marketing.
Was it Andrea?
No.
We can get back to that. I mean, it seems to, so many of the people that I've read the transcripts and seen their interviews said exactly what you just said, that you gave them leeway to explore and do their own projects, their own personal projects, and yet the workload was huge. And but a lot of them felt that it was such an exciting time to be involved with something that was so new. And,
Yeah. I'd be very interested in hearing honestly what some of those people said about me. I know never get that, but I know a lot of them must have thought I was the world's worst guy.
I've never heard anybody say anything
Yeah,
like that.
I haven't either.
They all talk about how much fun it was, how much fun they had in their social setting too. They mentioned a little bit about the soap opera quality of everyone having relationships with each other and going out together, and how you were very encouraging of women.
Very what?
Encouraging and supportive. You gave them a lot of good positions of responsibility, which was unusual at the time. And Andrea did mention this woman that you talked about, and I can't remember her name either.
I'm spacing her name.
But she did mention the vice president position.
We actually had two women that were vice president. I can't think of any, of course, I can't think of any of the men that we had for vice presidents now, the name of any of the men. Eddie Curry may have been a VP in engineering.
But I mean,
None of
you
that meant
mentioned
very
that you
much.
were a taskmaster, and you knew what you wanted, and you were very stern at times, But
Well, David Bonnell's favorite story was that I called him in his office to chew
take
him
your
out.
hands down away
I'm
from
sorry.
these things.
I'm not going to tell you my story now.
Oh, come on.
You sounded like a teacher.
If
I
you-
know.
are
I
you-
was ready to act like a nun and slap him with my ruler.
Have you interviewed David Bonnell?
Yeah.
He may have told you the story, but his favorite story used to be how I invited him into my office to chew him out one day and spent about 20 minutes chewing him out, and then gave him a promotion when I let him go. Did he ever tell you that? Or
I don't remember if that was in
I don't
the-
remember that.
I don't think that was in the transcript. But you still thought he was doing a great job?
Well, he had screwed something up, but yeah, I thought he was doing a great job, and I wanted to let him know that I was not very happy about whatever he'd done. But overall, I thought he was doing a pretty good job. I think probably what happened is I realized I'd crushed him, and I didn't really mean to crush him, so I figured I had to do something to back up from it. He loves to. He remembers more of the story than I do, but.
Did you go out and party with the group?
Not very much. I was raised in an Air Force environment as far as management. Remember, one of the colonels that I worked for before I got commissioned said that all your troops know that you get in your pants one leg at a time, but you never let them see you do it. And that's a pretty good rule for a manager if you're talking about an operation bigger than a few people. Matter of fact, a lot of them right now, when I talk to them, they say, "You seem different than you used to be." I mean, we're not. There's no, it's a different environment altogether. But you need to maintain some sort of there needs to be some sort of wall there that you don't go across, and you have to be real careful about that.
Can you describe your environment in your office? You described your workday a bit and some of the people you work with. Can you actually describe what the environment was like? What did it look like? We heard that you chain smoked.
Me smoke? Yeah, they used to say they could tell when I got there every morning by hearing the coughing. What are you thinking about in terms of what was the environment like?
Well, just design elements for recreating a little feeling of the MITS offices in the display. So were there things around you that you remember? Paul remembers an orange ashtray that you had. Just sort of things around the office. And
That ashtray was one that was about this big. It's still around here somewhere. It was given to me by the office when I got out of the Air Force. Everybody got together, and they gave that to me. And it was supposed to be an ashtray that would last me an hour, and it was about that big. It was a big, thick glass ashtray.
I would die to have that. in the
We
display.
need, we need that for the display. Everyone has talked about your ashtray.
Well, that's where that came from. It was supposed to be a joke. I was smoking 4 or 5 packs of cigarettes a day when I quit. Smoking. And you go through a lot of cigarettes if you're staying up 18 hours a day, Go 18 hours a day. We didn't have very much phony stuff at MITS, so that's what I was trying to think of several times during this conversation. That I thought you were kind of looking for was sort of the things, that little cutesy kinds of things, stuff like that. There was none of that at MITS. We never did anything like that. That was just personally not my style. I don't think we had anybody there that would really got into that kind of stuff. Where it was, everything was pretty much,
It sounded like it was such a rigorous schedule.
I think everybody stayed pretty busy. We always had stuff to do.
What was it like to ship the first kit computer? What did it feel like for you?
By that time, we shipped so many products, I don't think it was any specific. That was not a specific milestone. The first call that I personally took was sort of a milestone. But shipping the first computer, I don't remember when we did it or anything about it. I probably didn't even know when it was shipped. Because they've been putting stuff together to ship, and it, could have been shipped one afternoon. I mean, nothing was ever done about it. That was the kind of stuff we never did. Maybe we should have done more of. It might have been done a better job for Spirit of Core if we'd have had, saying this is machine number 1,000 or something. But we never did any of that kind of stuff. A lot of things that I've looked back on, if I had to do over again, I would probably do differently like that.
What was the first call? You mentioned the first call that was.
That was the guy who said about the dentist who was trying to control the model railroad set.
Okay.
I want to hear about the decisions you would have made differently, if there's some that come to mind.
Well, just that. I think I would probably maybe I would have done a little bit more symbol kinds of things like that. This is computer number 1,000 or something. But I don't think we ever really need to do that. Everybody knew everybody that was there, I think, admits at the time, knew they were in something that was very important and something that was going to make a difference and was excited about it. One of the things that I thought about, Relay, that you ever heard of Robert Scott? Wrote God Is My Co-Pilot. He died here about 2 months ago. And the guy's about 100 years old. I met him in Atlanta about 5 or 6 years ago. And we were talking. One of the things I asked him, I said, when you guys were coming back from those missions, did you realize those were probably the high points of your life? He said, yeah, we knew they were the high points of our lives. He said, we talked about it on the radio. He said, we'd say, they're paying us to do this. And I made me think, because some of that admits was sort of that way too. So it was pretty exciting. And I'm sure a lot of the jobs weren't exciting, but if you were in the marketing or engineering or anything like that, what you were doing was really pretty software. That was exciting stuff. And
So you were aware of that excitement at times?
yeah, we knew we were doing something unusual and something that you might not. I don't know if we ever thought about. You might not ever do it again, but you certainly knew that this was a unique situation.
I would love for you to say that again, but your hand was up by your mouth. Yeah. We're just kind of. But that was just a great comment, though.
Which one was that?
You were aware.
You were aware of what you were doing, that it was exciting.
Yeah, I think we were all aware that what we were doing was exciting, and that we were doing something unusual, and it was going to make a difference. And I think everybody that worked at MITS, again, maybe the guy that swept the floor didn't feel that way. I don't even know that he didn't, but I think that everybody there felt like that they were making a contribution that was unique. They weren't just loading that bale or that kind of thing. They were actually making decisions that made a difference.
When was MITS at its peak?
The day it was sold, I guess, we sold in terms of volume. We just kept going up and up and up. The day the year the Altair came out, I think we did these may not be exactly right numbers, but I think we did $1 million in gross sales. The next year we did $3 million. The next year I think we did $6 million. And the year that we were sold out, we were running at a $13 million rate. So we were moving pretty fast. One of the things that was tough about doing it is every time you make a decision, establish this is going to be our policy, you had to change it because all the numbers were different. What sounded good today didn't make any sense, a week from then.
What was your decision to sell the company?
Pertec had a lot of money and I didn't. Pretty much purely mercenary. I got to tell you, I was pretty well burned out by the time we got into there. The toughest part of running MITS was not when we were looking at any minute to go bankrupt. It was when we couldn't keep up with the orders. That was by far the toughest part of running MITS. And I'd been kind of under that gun for about 6 or 7 years, and I'd really pretty much had it. I needed to get away. In fact, I told people when I left MITS that once I left there, I wasn't going to make another decision for at least 6 months. And I got back here and bought some farmland, started farming. And it took me about 15 seconds to realize you need to be doing something different than this. What's that thing about don't wish for, how does that go? Don't.
Be careful what you wish for.
Yeah, because you may get them.
Yeah. You'll get it.
Right.
What are some of the things, the failures? You talked about, what was really good about the Altair. What were some of the failures? Or were there any? Besides you being totally burnt out.
In terms of the technical part of the Altair, there were a number of things, like the power supply I mentioned on the first machine, need to be redone. But part of that, I'm rationalizing, I guess, we were making decisions without any data. I didn't know how big a power supply we needed. I didn't know. All those decisions made lots of decisions. Our markup was really, really bad. I took heat for that for 15 years. I saw articles being written that I'd screwed up the personal computer industry for the past 15 years because of the markups. And we had a real low markup. It was really low, and it's still fairly low on computers. And nobody's ever been able to really overcome that, because I guess it's just really pretty hard to start backing up and increasing the margins. But I think I'd gone through the calculator business, and so I was running gun shy. I think at that point, I didn't want to see anybody steal that business away from us, get cheaper than we were, and all that. So that was a failure of management there, and it was that's the reason I was doing it. But it's still
There was talk about the S100 bus. Can you talk about that at all?
not without getting mad.
Alrighty. Do we want to hear? Do we want to see that?
I think we should be.
No, the thing, huh?
Oh yeah.
Did you say you needed to leave at 5? Or?
5:30.
That clock is not right.
Yeah, it's 5 to 5 now.
Okay.
Or 10 to 5.
Okay.
So,
I think we're supposed to meet somebody at 5:30, I believe.
Let's go through how we're doing.
The thing that made me mad about the S100 bus is it was all our competitors were using the Altair bus, and then they started calling the S100 bus and changed the name. And even now, if you look at stuff, people say, well, Altair used the S100 bus, and all that really just grinds me. You know, those people made a lot of money off using our bus, and then didn't have the integrity to admit whose bus it was.
Let's see. If we
Is
only
there-
got a couple more.
is there something?
Skating.
Yeah.
I'm going to do the end first, though.
Yes.
Okay. Just only have
We're gonna
2
try to
seconds.
get this down to about 5 questions.
Okay.
Hold on, let me make a note. Okay. You were just talking about actually setting the story straight about the S100 bus. Is there anything else that, you know, stories that have been told that this is a good chance for you to like really set the story straight on it?
The stories that we use surplus parts, we never use surplus parts. We always use first quality. That's not widespread, but it's come up on several occasions. That the reason the bus had 100 pins was because we got some connectors that had 100 pins. That's not true at all. Matter of fact, it was surplus pins. It turns out the actual Molex connector we used was a brand new connector. It hadn't been used before. There was no way to have surplus connectors on it, and that kind of stuff that's always kind of irritated me. Oh, one thing that added some to it is we were selling the Altair for $395. Well, Intel was selling the chip and a couple of memory chips for $395 through the distributor with nothing. That's all. And the distributors pitched a fit as to why we could sell a whole computer with everything that went to it for the same price they were getting. And so Intel told them they were selling us defective parts, and they were special parts. And we really got into it with Intel, and I told them we would sue them if they sent us anything other than first class parts. And Intel finally said they would guarantee the parts to meet all the temperature specs that anybody else's part met, but they were just going to call them 8080s instead of 8080Cs or something. But they wrote us a letter that they would be full spec parts. So. But anyway, that got around. They were using cheap parts, and there one of those little things. There's tons of those that come up all the time. Stories about this person or that person, like I mentioned with Solomon, saying he did the design, he didn't have anything to do with the design. That Radio Electronics contacted us wrong. We contracted Radio Electronics. There is a story that may or may not be true that Radio Electronics contacted a number of people that had provided them articles after we contacted them to build a computer with the idea of them being backups in case we didn't come through. I don't know whether that's true or not, but that has come up.
Do you mean Popular Electronics? Or do you
Popular Electronics, yeah.
Right.
And I do know that Art Salzberg was, if you look at that editorial again, that's an interesting editorial just from a historical standpoint. He was hot on the project.
Can you talk about there have been a lot of different views about the arbitration between MITS and Microsoft. Can you talk about that from your point of view?
From my point of view, well, it turned out the arbitrator didn't understand anything at all. They had to go back and redo the thing after it was all done. I don't know whether you heard that or not, because the arbitrator thought that we'd gotten $75,000 from NCR and that we needed to pay that to them. And we never got a nickel from NCR. And that was pretty clear after they had about 3 months of arbitration that the arbitrator didn't have a clue as to what went on. So they ended up arbitrating the thing outside the arbitrator where they said that this all happened after I left. You understand that, right? I was there during the early part of the arbitration. They threw me out of there because they said I was too much of a troublemaker. We caught Bill in a lie in federal court. He had claimed he was at a meeting in San Francisco where people were talking about stealing his software and that we weren't going to do anything to stop it or something like that. It turned out I happened to know that at the time of that was going on, he was in Boston. So when we got into arbitration, this was in federal court when this came. When we got in arbitration, I got our attorney to ask him about that. That was his first question. He said, in this court thing, and the things from the court deal, it says you were in San Francisco on such and such a date doing this. And Bill said yes. And he said, well, how is it you were in Boston at the same time? And then Bill realized he was caught. So I misspoke and all that, but he perjured himself. He knew he'd perjured himself. There was no misspoken to it at all. Because he made up this long story about how he, all this had gone on. And so I wanted them to go after, they wouldn't go after him. I wanted them to go ahead and go after him with a federal court on that little bit of thing. And they said, no, we want to have a long-term working relationship. And my approach is no on philosophical things. There's an old Chinese saying that a lion uses all his strength even when he attacks a mouse. And I wouldn't have hesitated. I would have, if I'd have still been running the show, we would have gone after him. And not because I don't like him. I'm just saying that that's if he wants to play hardball, we'll play hardball. How we don't get off on that?
Well,
But
can
you asked about arbitration.
Yeah, I asked about arbitration. Do you have more to say about that?
No, it's just the whole issue was so complex. The fundamental issue was we bought that we agreed with them, agreed to buy software from them or to lease it from
Can you
them.
say who them is? So, thanks.
Yates and Gates, or Gates and Allen. We agreed to buy software from, which initially was going to be paid with royalties. Then once we reached a certain point, the software belonged to us. Well, we reached that point with them on software, and they suddenly were going to go out and sell it to somebody else. That's the reason we went to federal court to stop them. And we won in federal court. Federal court said we didn't do it. Once they realized they weren't going to make any money, and Gates told me this. He said, what's my downside? That, he says, you're not going to pay me any more money, so I'm not going to get anything else. Why shouldn't I sue to try to get it back? So that's what the arbitration was, to say that we didn't really own the software. And he tried to show that we really didn't own the software because we hadn't paid money that they were supposed to get, which was not true at all. Anyway, I don't remember all the details now, but the whole thing got so complicated, and they said I was too emotional to be involved in it, and that was about they'd set me up when Pertec took over. They put me in charge of Skunk Works, or let me have my own Skunk Works, which was really a good deal. I had 2 or 3 employees just to design whatever I wanted to. So the first thing I designed was a laptop computer, a portable computer. And we had a meeting in Phoenix. This was within a month or 2 after the merger. We had a meeting in Phoenix, and the long and short of it was the marketing people got ecstatic over the idea of this portable computer. They really thought it was the hottest thing since peanut butter. So I left the meeting, went back home really feeling good. Well, a few days later, I got a call saying that the executive VP wanted to see me. And he said, look, we've been looking at this thing. And I can't remember what the name of the president of Pertec was. He said, we've been looking at this thing. And we'd had arguments all along about where personal computers were going. But he said, we looked at this thing. He said, first of all, we're not convinced that people need personal computers on their desk. But we're sure as hell convinced they don't need them in their lap. And I said, you're right. I think you're absolutely right. And I think the thing for me to do is to get out of your hair. And if we just consider this my resignation, I'll go back and farm in Georgia. And that's what I did. But they didn't think laptop computers were a good idea. So I said, okay. One of us has got our head screwed on sideways. So.
Sorry, is that it?
That's the tape.